Hey guys, it's Wednesday and I am at the Tar Heel Stadium at UNC Chapel Hill, and yeah, it's really big and cool. So today I'm going to be talking about the coolest person in history besides Jesus, of course.
Who do you think is responsible for the outcome of World War II? Dwight D. Eisenhower? Maybe one of the other very important and famous generals? No, it was not. Juan Pujol Garcia was the man who caused World War II to end the way it did. Born to a wealthy family in Barcelona in 1912, Juan quickly used all of his money. He dropped out of boarding school at age 15 and instead went to an academy for poultry farmers. After this, he did his 21 months of mandatory military service and then dropped out and bought a movie theater. His movie theater did not work out for him, so he tried buying a smaller one, which also did not work out for him. So he pretty much just ended up being a chicken farmer and marrying a girl he didn't really like. In 1931, just after all this happened, King Alfonso XIII fled the country, leaving no one in charge of Spain. This caused the communist and fascist parties to have a bloody battle over who would control Spain, and then in July 1936, Spain erupted into a massive civil war. Juan, again, military wasn't for him, so he decides he's gonna leave and then get caught and then get thrown in jail. But fortunately, that jail had a jailbreak which he accidentally took part of, escaping and going back to his hometown of Barcelona. Unfortunately, he never saw his fiancée ever again. In 1938, Juan finally emerged, and he looked so rough after his years of isolation that he was able to forge a document, legally kind of, that he was too old to fight in the military. So this guy's not looking too well. In desperate need for money, Juan finally lands a job managing a very bad Madrid hotel called the Majestic. His real goal here was to meet someone to get him out of Spain, because he did not want to be there. One day, the Spanish Duke of Tor walks into his hotel room complaining about his two aunts, who happened to be elderly princesses. They were really upset that they were unable to get any scotch since the war started. Well, guess what? Juan happened to know where to get some, right across the border in Portugal. In Spain at this time, it was completely impossible to get a passport to leave the country. This was his one opportunity. He wagered the Duke a deal. Give me a passport, I'll get you some scotch. He agreed. Juan ran over into Portugal, grabbed 6 bottles of scotch, came back, grabbed his passport, and was out of there. But unfortunately, Juan was trapped by one man, Hitler. If Juan would have even left the country, he would have been immediately stopped by the Nazi invasion of the majority of Europe. So since he couldn't escape, well, why not he attack the guy who's not allowing him to escape? In January of 1941, he decides, you know what, I'm going to be a spy. He walks into the British embassy and asks for a job as a spy. But unfortunately, he knew absolutely nothing about espionage. They turned him down on the spot. So, can't get a job for the Allies, he calls up the Germans, says, hey, I'll spy for the Nazis. The guy on the phone says, sure, come to the Café Lyon at 16:30 military time the next day. He walks in, talks to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German named Frederico. Juan decides, I'm going to put on a big show. He starts declaring his love for Hitler and the Nazi ideals right off the top of his head. Juan listed off as many random Democrats he could think of, claiming that they were high-ranking German officials and that he was close friends with them. Frederico was very impressed, so he says, well, let's meet back. Next time at a beer house, Juan showed him his passport, which was his ticket to getting in to the Nazi spy ring called the Abwehr. Yes, that's German. The next thing he needed, a visa. The Nazis told him, Go to the embassy and get yourself a visa. The embassy turned him down. Juan's like, no, I need to do something to fight. Obviously, if you haven't picked up on it, he's being a double agent. He's not going to purposely be a Nazi. He's not going to actually be a Nazi. But, luckily, once again, he befriended a dude named Jamie Souza, who, guess what, had a visa. While they were playing roulette one day, Juan had an idea. He pretends to be doubled over with horrible stomach cramps, runs to the bathroom, runs out of the bathroom, runs to the room, and grabs the visa. Takes a couple of pictures, forges another one. Federico was so incredibly impressed, he immediately let him in, gave him a couple $1,000, and gave him a code name, Arabelle. Now, all he had to do, move to England, pretend to be a BBC radio announcer, and grab some intelligence. But before Juan did this, he ran over to Portugal, ran to the British embassy, and was like, hey, I'm a Nazi spy now, can I spy for you guys as a double agent? Guess what they said? No. Again. It's pretty predictable that the British embassy would be doing this, of course, because they had had some very bad ideas during the war to try to hinder the Germans. They even considered staging the second coming of Christ across the German countryside to hinder the fighting. Juan continues working for the Nazis, of course, falsely. The Nazi spy ring tells him, hey, you need to recruit some more agents. So he's like, okay. So he made up 27 completely fake people so that if something went wrong, he could just blame them instead of taking the blame himself. Using various different media outlets as his inspiration, Juan starts writing crazy, random, pointless letters to the Nazis just to waste their time. But he figures, I'm going to actually have to start saying something legitimate or they're not going to believe me ever. So he applies to the British embassy. Another time, and another time, and another time. Rejection 5 times in a row. Well, one time he actually got a little bit too close on one of his fake messages. He told the Germans that a convoy of 5 Allied ships had left Liverpool for Malta. Well, that actually had happened. MI5 intercepted the message and freaked out. The whole British government was looking for him, thinking that he was in England, of course, which he was still in Portugal. Next time, he told them that a massive armada was departing for Wales. Italian planes used thousands of gallons of fuel, and the German U-boats wasted hundreds of man-hours going for this completely false armada. That got the government's attention. MI5 finally decides, you know what, this guy's worth something. They smuggled him into London and hired him as a double agent. His nickname on the British lines was GARBO. Probably heard it. Agent GARBO. He continuously recruited more of his false agents, becoming more and more creative as he went along. And I quote, he had a traveling salesman, a cave-dwelling waiter, a retired Welsh seaman turned into a fascist mercenary, and an Italian poet nicknamed Rags, and an OCD codenamed Moonbeam. And he even said he had an employee at the Britain's Ministry of War. A lot of these spies actually earned real salaries funded by the Nazis. Working with M15, he had actual military information so that he could convince the Nazis that he was telling the truth a lot of the time. One of the major points that he really gained trust with was the Operation Torch, the campaign to invade North Africa, when he told the Nazis exactly when and where the Allies would attack 1 week before the invasion. But guess what? MI5 purposely delayed the letter by a couple of days, causing absolutely nothing to happen but them to know that his information was correct. By June of 1943, GARBO was one of the Nazis' most prized spies and one of MI5's most prized double agents. The Nazis even circled a memo saying that he was a 45,000-man army. In 1943, England was preparing for D-Day. thousands and thousands of military vehicles, men, everything, everywhere. The Germans are going to notice this. What do? He decides, well, I'm going to tell them that they're going to be landing, not in Normandy, but in Calais, 200 miles north of Normandy. He had to convince the Nazis that a non-existent million-man army was gathering in northern England. This fake army actually had a real code name, the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG. The British got on board with this as well, putting up inflatable tanks, building fake hospitals and oil rigs, and even building fake airstrips with wooden planes. It was a crazy amount of effort with no people. The newspapers got on board too, complaining about the constant riffraff by soldiers that were causing. General Patton even journeyed to the area to encourage the imaginary troops. Of course, while all this is happening, GARBO has to get in on it. He sends his best agents to spy on these fake troops, and many of his agents reported seeing random bombers all over the place and just completely confusing the crap out of Hitler, causing him to keep 250,000 troops in Scandinavia instead of sending them to where they could have possibly overthrown the Allies. By the May of 1944, the Nazi high command, completely confused. The field marshal was very determined that FUSAG was absolutely real, and so he continuously pushed to have that army there. And just before D-Day, the Allies made sure, instead of bombing anything in Normandy, they blew up a bunch of railroad junctions all around Calais. And after all this, the entire Nazi government pretty much coincided that, obviously, they're not attacking Normandy, they're attacking at Calais. The Nazis got pretty confused when at 6:30 a.m. on June 6, 1944, the Allied troops started storming Normandy on D-Day. And it's actually pretty interesting because the German 7th Army was stationed nearby, snoozing in their barracks. And the General Hans Spadil actually told both of his armies to be on very low alert because it was rainy. Yeah. Back in Berlin, the staff refused to even wake Hitler at the news of the storming of Normandy because they did not believe a word of it was true. 2 days go by, tens of thousands of troops land, but the Germans still are dead certain that the Allies are going to attack Calais and that Normandy is just a distraction to get them to move their armies that way. Then, on June 9th, General Gerd von Rundstedt, really got down on his knees and begged Hitler to send in the panzers, and Hitler was like, fine, send them in. If you don't know what the Panzer is, that is the Nazi tank squadrons of death. So, they got this massive Panzer battalion going straight for the Allied troops. Will tear them to pieces if something is not done. GARBO steps in, says, quote, I am of the opinion, in view of the strong troop concentrations in southeastern and eastern England, which are not taking part in the present operations, that these operations are a divisionary maneuver designed to draw off enemy reserves in order then to make a decisive attack in another place. It may very probably take place in the Pas de Calais area. The message immediately was forwarded to Berlin. Hitler's secretary underlined the word divisionary, handed it to a higher official, who handed it to Hitler himself. Then Hitler was like, stop the panzers, send them to Calais. We won the war because of everything that just happened. Because of GARBO's amazing lying skills and his insaneness, the Nazis are very desperate, on the brink of destruction, award him an Iron Cross and tell him to give up, thinking that all cause is lost. But then, on the other side, the King of England made him a member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, one of the nation's greatest honors. Juan GARBO was the only person to get honored on both sides of the war. Well, guys, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that story. I certainly enjoyed telling it. That was a lot of fun. Be sure and check out some more of our videos, especially this one right here about some awesome quotes, and this one right here about some of the weirdest things in the universe. Always subscribe to the channel, and Hail Hydra.